that instance, fixed penalties will apply. The next amendment, Mr. President, is related to Section 121(1), which also speaks about how the order will be implemented. It specifically talks about negative resolution. Ordinarily, I think in parliamentary parlance, you have positive resolution and you have negative resolution. The option that has been taken here by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel is for negative resolution. And Section 122 was then amended to make special regulations subject to that negative resolution rather than positive or affirmative resolution. The bill is before the chamber. We've had an opportunity to review it, and I want, for the benefit of the chamber and all of those listening, to get into the why of the amendments. Now, let me start first by saying, Mr. President, that these are not amendments that change fundamentally the existing scope of the bill. They allow us to implement the already existing provisions in the bill, and they clarify how they're meant to be implemented. There are two things, Mr. President, at play here. And if you listened to the Honorable Attorney General in the other place, you would have heard the context for these changes. And why, Mr. President? I, a law-abiding citizen that I am, have gotten one ticket in my life. And I was, I think, an 18-year-old at the time. I was home on vacation. So all these times I have been a good road user. I can see some senators looking at me side-eye. But I got one ticket as a young 18-year-old at home for the holidays from university overseas, and I did not stop at a stop sign. It was right in the back there, actually, in town where going places used to be back in the day, and I came to the end, and I came to a rolling stop. I didn't actually stop. You know when you're young, you're feeling yourself, and you're behind the wheel, you're behind the wheel of a car, you've got your parents' car, and you're moving. And so I got to the stop. There was nothing coming. It was a one-way street, and there was traffic that could only come from one direction, and there was nothing ahead of me. And so I came to a rolling stop. Police siren. Man stops me. Pull over, and he tells me, because he was looking at me and seeing the youth in my face, right? So he's got this little way here now. And so he says, "Can you see that sign back there?" "Which sign, sir?" "There." He says, "It's a red sign right there on the post. Can you read it?" And he said, "Do you know what it says?" He said, "S-T-O-P. Do you know what that means?" Stop. So he stopped me. And this time now I have fear and trembling because I drive in my mother's car. And I don't want to have to go home and tell my mother that I got a ticket for her car at 18 years old because she can be vexed. So I honestly don't even know. I talked to the man, talked to the police officer. I was very polite. I was young enough, and my mother always taught me to be respectful to my elders. And so I gave him all the information he wanted. I engaged with him. I accepted the correction as was necessary at the time. I was not wrong and strong. I was not powerful, foolish, and I went on about my business. I don't know what happened thereafter. I can't tell you if I ever actually got a ticket. I can't tell you what happened in the mail, if something ever came to me in the mail. I don't know. But in contrast, Mr. President, fast forward several years later, I was driving in the passenger seat this time of a friend's car in South Africa. And we were driving on a highway, and he was speeding for sure. And police stepped out on the side of the highway with a traffic gun and pulled him right over. Extraordinarily polite, extremely professional. And he said to him, "Do you know why I pulled you over? You were speeding." And he talked him through, he showed him what the radar message registered his speeds at, and he issued him with a ticket. My friend at the time was able to decide on the basis of that ticket that he got, whether he was going to pay the ticket immediately online, which he could have done, or if he was going to contest what the police officer's radar clocked him as traveling at, and say that what the radar clocked you as traveling at was not true, and take the matter to court. He had the option, by way of a ticket being levied against him for speeding, of paying that fine without delay or going to contest it in court. In 2026, Mr. President, that's what is before this honorable chamber. Giving Barbadians the opportunity, when faced with a traffic offense listed in the legislation, to make a decision. Am I going to humble myself and acknowledge that I did the wrong thing, that I was speeding, that I crossed lanes improperly? This morning, Mr. President, actually, I was coming down the road. I was driving down Columara, and 2 lanes of traffic coming down. We were by Purity, and there was a woman with a male passenger in her seat, in her car, and she was driving up. But 2 lanes of traffic coming down, and she has stopped on the lane going towards Columara. And she is carrying on and cussing because nobody in the lanes coming down is stopping for her to turn into Purity. But when I stopped, Mr. President, I stopped and watched her antics, but there's a double lane, a double solid yellow line there that she's not supposed to turn right at. Yeah, maybe she did think it was decoration, but she was willfully and arrogantly trying to break the law, and vexed that people were not facilitating her in so doing. If a police officer had come up there at that time and had observed her, indicators on and all, attempting to turn across a double line, she would have had an option. Acknowledge that you were doing foolishness, you were breaking the law, and you were not entitled to be mad at anybody for not letting you across in front of them because you were crossing 2 lanes of traffic to turn into Purity. And you're not supposed to do that. Or she could decide to be willful and powerful foolish and go to court and decide to contest it. That's what this legislation gives you the opportunity to do. It gives you the opportunity to choose whether to acknowledge right or wrongdoing and to pay the fine up front. But in instances where whether you are wrong is questionable and you feel that you have a solid case that you want to contest, only then do we go into the court system to have them make a definitive judgment on whether you are to pay a fine or not. Now, that brings me to the second part of this legislation and why this legislation is important. Mr. President, if I, as a young 18-year-old, had to go and stand up in court with nothing else to do with my life at the time because I was on vacation from university and I was home from being overseas, that is one matter. But if I am a professional, if I'm a single mother, if I am a shop owner, if I am a vendor, if I am a Barbadian who has a business to run and I'm a sole proprietor and I have picked up a traffic ticket for an offense, a ticketable offense, and I have to go to the courts, the current system of the courts will not allow me to simply go in and say, yes, no, here is my money, here is my $50 or whatever the fine is, and I want to pay it and go on back about my business. The system means that you have to give up, as it stands now, a whole day sitting in traffic court under the current system, waiting for your case to be called. That's productive time, Mr. President. That is productive time in a Barbados that we say in 2026 has to be respectful not of people's time, but wants greater levels of productivity. That is an anachronistic system that this government is attempting to move away from. So the first point, Mr. President, is that you can choose. No, it's to pay the ticket or contest the fines, thereby thinning the density of the number of persons having to go into the court system. So rather than 100% of persons with tickets going into the court system, it is only persons who want to contest whether they actually deserved a ticket or not going into the court system. That reduces the density, takes the burden off of the traffic system, and allows for persons to get on with their lives. Now, the third layer of that, Mr. President, is how do you then deal with persons who are accumulating multiple tickets? I have seen instances under the current legislation in the way that it is structured without the demerit system being in place, which is the second layer that is now being addressed, where persons commit traffic offenses, sometimes horrific traffic offenses, where lives are lost. And we've seen instances, especially in public service vehicles, where lives are lost. And when you look at the record of this driver, they have hundreds of accumulated tickets, but they're still driving. Owners know this, and they're letting them still drive their vehicles. Operators know this, and they're still driving their vehicles because they presume that until such time as they get around to having a court date in the traffic court system, with all of the backlog that is there, they will just continue doing what they feel like doing. This system now introduces a demerits system. It says you can do wrong some of the time, but you can't do wrong all of the time. That's really what the legislation is saying here. It is saying to people that wrongdoing, like the woman who was driving up by Purity this morning and vexed with people, is not something that this country should be sanctioning. It ought not to matter who does it if you think you are entitled to do the wrong thing versus somebody else. If it's wrong, period. And if you are so clear in your mind as to what wrongdoing is, my mother always used to tell me, know for yourself first. My Sunday school teacher always used to tell me, you take the speck out of the mote out of your eye, Nurev, before you attempt to take the speck out of somebody else's. You cannot behave poorly and speak about others and their behavior. So we have to be able now, in this legislation, to hold people accountable. The days of persons accumulating racks and racks and racks of paper by way of tickets and still driving on the nation's roads and causing damage to life and limb really have come to an end with this legislation and the introduction of the demerit points. What it also does, Mr. President, is it allows, if you get a certain number of points demerited from your license, your driving record, like in other jurisdictions, including in the United States, where many Barbadians come and they go and they travel and they rent a car, they get to Miami International Airport, they get a car, they pick up a car from in the car park area where they have all the rental cars, and they drive out to the airport, and boom, they're gone. And for the entire time that they're there, they've rented a vehicle and they're driving. So, Mr. President, you can't continue to drive with your license intact if you have racked up a certain number of demerit points. There will be a point, just like when you are in the United States driving, where your license will be revoked. This legislation allows for us to do that. So one, it establishes the ticketing system, it strengthens the penalties, it establishes the minister setting those fines, those penalties by order, and it establishes the demerit framework, but it also takes important strain off of the court burden, off the court system. So that's really what this two-page legislation and its amendments are about. Is this the sum total of the overall reform of the road traffic system? I would probably have to say it can't be. There are any other number of things that we expect that through the Ministry of Transport and Works dealing with the transportation system that we expect that they're going to come along the way with. So what is expected here now, Mr. President? The Ministry of Transport and Works has indicated that there's meant to be a public education campaign so that in very simple terms, people understand what is being done. It simply means, one, you are protecting people's time. Two, you're protecting people from having to waste time in the court system. How many times, Mr. President, when you want to go to a doctor, you go into the doctor, especially Some doctors are in here, and you spend the whole day sometimes in the waiting room, waiting to be seen, or hours waiting to be seen. I remember certainly with my GP, and my GP has been my GP since I was 16 years old. I'm a creature of habit. So once I lock in, I lock in. So we've now built a relationship whereby if I have an appointment, especially my annuals, I will call. His nurse knows me. It's known me since I was 16. And they will say, all right, Lisa, we're running a little bit late today. My appointment is supposed to be at X time. Don't come yet. We'll call you maybe 30 minutes out, ready for you. And they will call me because if they're running behind, I don't want to waste time sitting in the office when I could be doing other things. Or alternately, I will go early in the morning. But the point here, Mr. President, is that when we build relationships, especially over long periods of time, we come to figure out how to save time because we're so used to going in other places where we have zero control over the time that we spend. And there are people who may not have as stellar a driving record as I do, and who may have had experiences in traffic court, unlike me, but they may have had the experience. I've heard people say, Mr. President, that they sit down and they waited a whole day for their case to be called, and then at the end of the day, they didn't get their case called, and they got to come back again. So they haven't even just you wasted one full day, but they've gone back again. So, Mr. President, quite frankly, this is 2026, and I know that we're talking about technology, I know that we're talking about payment systems online, I know we're talking about making things easier, but ultimately, this is about making business in this country easier for Barbadians. This is about simplifying Barbadians' interactions with the state so that everything, and certainly for me as the minister with responsibility for business, every interaction with the state ought not to be a pain point. It really ought not to be. Every interaction with the state ought not to be something that you have to hold your head and say, Lord have mercy, let me prepare myself to go in this government office now. I really want to have to deal with that. This takes a lot of that away. And it gives people the opportunity, Mr. President, to choose how they want to interact. Do I want to interact online? Do I want to save my time and not argue and claim right when I know I'm wrong? And if I want to claim right because I know I'm right, then I will go to the court and I will navigate the system in that way. And so, Mr. President, this is the two-page amendment before this honorable chamber. It is intended to create greater law and order on our roads, to instill greater discipline, to be able to manage with efficiency the administration of justice on the roads, as well as in our court system, to lend itself to judicial efficiency gains, to allow for administrative flexibility, and also to align with the best practices that we see in other jurisdictions when we travel. It aligns, Mr. President, with the experience that I described over 15 years ago in South Africa. It aligns, Mr. President, with the last person in this honorable chamber who went to Miami and rented a car at Miami International Airport and drove out. This is what we see everywhere else we go, and Barbados is now introducing this system. And so I want to support this legislation, Mr. President, obviously as the one who is introducing it, and beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is not this, sorry, no speakers? The question is that this bill be read a second time. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Thanks, the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the Senate resolves itself into committee for further deliberation on this bill.
The question is that they do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The Honourable, the Senate is now in committee.
Madam Chair, clauses 1 through 4.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clauses 1 through 4 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 through 4 do now stand part. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye?
Aye.
All those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Will all honourable senators in favour please say aye?
Aye.
Those against, would you please say no? The ayes have it.
The President has reported the passing of one bill in committee. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill not be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2026.
The question is that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2026. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, order number 10. In the name of the Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to rescind a resolution passing by the Honorable of the House of Assembly on the 19th day of July 2022 and the Honorable of the Senate on the 10th day of August 2022 and published in the Official Gazette as resolution number 17/2022 on the 18th day of August 2022 to approve the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of 2 parcels of land situated at Sergeant's Village in the parish of Christchurch in this island for a public purpose, namely housing development.
Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I beg your permission to treat to orders number 10 and 11 as a cognate debate.
The question is the orders number 10 and 11. 10 dealing with the resolution to rescind the resolution previously passed, and 11 to pass a new resolution in relation to the same parcel of land. For the benefit of those in my hearing, the two matters, if the Honourable Senate agrees to be debated in terms of the policy issues, however, they'll be voted on individually as per our rules. The question is that items number 10 and 11 be dealt with as a cognate debate. Will those honourable senators in favour please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Accordingly, we will treat items number 10 and 11 as a cognate debate. Senator Cummins, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. In 2022, in this honourable chamber, I actually went back to my notes on this bill from 2022. I went back to my notes, yeah. And at the time, the resolution on the vesting of this piece of land at Sergeant's Village, there were a couple of things that I made reference to at the time. We talked about the fact that the acquisition of 1,222.2 square meters in one instance and 5,798.8 square meters in the other instance, constituting a total of 7,021 square meters, was being vested for the purpose of creating housing opportunities at Sergeant's Village. In my notes, it tells me that I said we were back at the House to vest the parcel of land in the National Housing Corporation. That is what was said in the other place, and it is what was said in this place in 2022. It said at the time that this is government's main housing executing arm, and they are intent on providing housing solutions for Barbadians. It went on to say, Mr. President, that the lands to be vested in the NHC at the time were formally owned, and it listed the names of the persons, and they were shown on a plan dated August 26, 2021, and recorded at the Lands and Surveys Department on September 1st, 2021. This was the basis on which the Attorney General certified that the resolution was fit to be introduced into Parliament, but by way of Cabinet's approval for, as I said, the vesting of these lands in the NHC. Fast forward to where we are now, Mr. President, because despite what was said in the other place, and despite what I know was said in this place in 2022, by way of administrative error, what was published was not what was debated, and it was not what was approved by the Parliament. And I chose, Mr. President, to make sure that I anchored this debate today because I had to go back to my own notes and to my transcripts from 2022, which did say at the time the land was to be vested in the National Housing Corporation. This, however, was not what was published, and the impact of that, Mr. President, as things happen, these things can happen, but the implications of them happening are sometimes dire for persons down the way. And here's where I start, Mr. President, because the persons in Sergeant's Village who are hoping by the end of this month to be in a position to have the housing solutions that have been built in the intervening period as a consequence of, one, the acquisition, two, the vesting as debated in both chambers, that those persons are now in a position where clean title cannot be transferred because of an administrative error when it reached the Gazette. And so what was published is not what we in this chamber debated or what the other place would have approved. And so as a consequence, Mr. President, it became clear that the published resolution contained two specific errors that required both the Cabinet to rectify it, which the Cabinet did late last year, and the Parliament now has attempted to rectify. It inadvertently omitted to state the entity in which the lands were to be vested, namely the NHC. Equally, Mr. President, it assigned the lands to the persons who originally the lands had been acquired from and not from the state. The lands had already been acquired by the state, and it made incorrect reference to the two private individuals that I mentioned before. And so in consultation with the Parliament, the clerks, whose judgment we are all guided by as to how best to proceed so that clean title would not inhibit the handing over of these properties to persons who are eagerly awaiting them being handed over to them, the Clerk of Parliament gave advice that recommended that the errors and omissions in the document purported to have been passed, but the transcripts don't support, purported to have been passed in the two houses of Parliament should therefore have amendments made, and that the corrected resolution should be placed on the order paper and the original one rescinded so that it was absolutely clear and title was absolutely clean to allow for final handover to the ultimate beneficiaries, who are those Barbadians who are anxiously awaiting their homes. And if many of us would recall those moments where we have the benefit of getting those keys to a home for the first time, this is something that I think we all want to be able to support on behalf of Barbadians. And so what the Parliament, what the Chamber is being asked to do today, Mr. President, quite simply, is to correct that administrative snafu and to be able to, one, rescind the original resolution and correct it for the record so that the conveyancing, the lawyers, and all of those persons who understand what goes into conveyancing are in a position to transfer clean title over to the beneficiaries of this project at Sergeant's Village. And I certainly am looking forward to being able to say that we have contributed in this Senate chamber to those persons having that benefit. And so with these very few words, Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Senator Walters.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution gives me the opportunity to deal with an issue that has been discussed in the lower house and now meet the media this morning, where, Mr. President, the senior minister of government is saying that there has been a fantastic job from HOPE. HOPE, Inc. is an entity that was created by the Barbados